anyone who signed a contract in the construction industry will understand that there's some massive opportunities to save significant time, costs, money, resources that could be better spent.
If there are other contractors listening to this, are you wanting them along on the journey with you?
Yes, we want you.
This is the road show.
We want you with us.
Hello and welcome to episode 259 of the Own the Build podcast with me, Paul Hemming. If you go into the show notes, there are lots and lots of ebooks for you to go and download for free. The latest one is Mastering Construction Procurement, its strategies for supply chain integration, tendering and commercial success. And as you guys know, I've dived into the vault of all of the Own the Build conversations with all of our experts to build up these show notes. I reckon somewhere in the future, I'm going to dive into this conversation that I'm about to have and steal some of the great ideas that we're about to unfold. So in the studio today, I am joined by Kate Kennedy, who is Head of Legal, Bids and Contract Transformation at Laing O'Rourke, who I think is a company that everyone will know very, very well. It is that contract transformation piece, which I am so interested in today, and all the listeners to this show, Kate, know that I'm a bit of a loser and a bit of a geek for this kind of stuff. So
that's great. Me too.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you're here. So welcome to the show, Kate. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks.
Excellent. So the title of this show is kind of something along the lines of, working title we'll call it, is Rewriting the Rules and How Laing O'Rourke is Transforming Construction Contracts. And as I understand it, you are at the heart of that process. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Excellent. And so just talk to us, before we get into contract transformation, about your career, I guess. Like, just paint the picture of your career today and how you ended up in construction.
So I went to university. I studied history. I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career.
Great subject, history.
Thank you. I was just told to do what I enjoyed. So I did what I enjoyed. Had a great time at university, obviously graduated, and then randomly fell into the first job that I got offered, which was a graduate scheme for Barclays.
Okay.
I have no idea why I took
Barclays
that job.
Bank?
Barclays Bank, yes. I've always been history, English, languages, so numbers for some reason. We didn't work out for the long term. So I went back home and decided to do law. So qualified as a lawyer, what feels like 100 years ago, and qualified into construction. Really, I didn't even know that construction law was a thing until I started in private practice. But it was I joined because the team were really nice, because I really
construction
liked
team.
The construction team
Come
were really
on.
nice. And the clients were really nice, and it was somewhere that I felt very comfortable.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I don't understand it. I'm a humble, feeble QS. Just what is the journey from, to use your language, like qualifying as a lawyer to then being a construction lawyer? Like, at what point do you say construction is for me? Was it literally you got into private practice and you tell me?
Yeah, so we used to have training contracts which were 2 years long, and you sit in different departments, 4 different departments of 6 months each, and you can either choose or it gets chosen for you, and construction was one of those. I hadn't chosen it, but I was given it, and I'm very pleased I did.
And so what, it was one that, so you then chose construction, this is where I want to
I did
settle.
6 months there, and then I decided I wanted to qualify, so you put your name forward and they choose whether they want you or not.
And they did.
And they did, fortunately.
And here we are.
And here we are.
And so could you describe what it was about construction, other than like the lovely clients and the lovely team that you were working in? Like, what was it that drew you to it?
I think it was probably the idea of having a direct impact on society as a whole, actually building things with bricks and mortar, which was way more interesting to me than, for example, my 6 months in finance, where essentially you're working, round the clock to move monies from A to B. That's really it.
And so this is something, I'm going off piste here. Kate,
we are, yes.
Yeah, but that's a really nice summary of what is nice about getting into construction, right? And I know it's construction law, so slightly different, but the tangible output of working in construction and like walking around London as I was doing this today, like you think, oh, I worked on that project, look at that project. Like it's a physical, tangible asset for all of the pain and effort that you go through. But we as an industry kind of have this problem with inviting people into or getting people excited about the industry, right? And it sounds like you had no desires to be in construction. You then got some exposure to construction and thought, oh, this is great because it's not fine. It's like a tangible asset. Feel like I'm doing something for society.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a wider point, and it is something that I think as an industry, we could really improve our sort of consistent team-wide, industry-wide narrative on why being in construction is so amazing. Because we build amazing things that do amazing things that improve society as a whole, and maybe that narrative isn't being told in the most effective way at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's not. I just think it's not strong enough, because everyone who you speak to in construction it's a hard industry to work in. I'm not going to wipe that away. Yeah. But the physical asset, and particularly in London, and you like look at that tower that I was involved in, or it's something like so meaningful.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's permanent or semi-permanent for 30, 40, 50 years. You look at that and think, I was involved in that. The blood, sweat and tears were part of the process, but look at it now. And it's just interesting to hear that the draw for you was obviously the team and the environment, but actually making an impact in that tangible piece, because I'm annoyed that we can't narrate that story well enough as an industry to get people excited about coming in, because I think they should be. Yeah,
it's a concerted narrative from everyone involved in the industry that we need to really
nail. I agree. Okay, and so let's go back to the construction journey, because I did digress there. But so you're now in private practice in a construction part of a
law firm. So I worked in private practice for, I think, about 13 years before then moving in-house to Laing O'Rourke. So I've been at Laing O'Rourke for about 4.5 years.
And so you were private practice, and then you've effectively become counsel at one of the biggest main contractors in the world, actually. And what's the difference? Like, why make that career change, I guess?
Do you know, it's strange. It sort of feels like it's the first time, or at least I feel in-house, it's the first time I've got a real job.
Really? Okay. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Because the impact of the work that we do within the legal team, has a direct impact on the business. And when you work for private practice, you do this work, you send it off, and then you may never hear what happens.
It's like one-off
to it.
Almost.
No, because, lawyers are expensive. So why would they get you involved in things that, are strategic, are commercial? Necessarily that doesn't always happen.
And so you segue me very nicely there, Kate, into something that is strategic and is commercial, which is the part of your role, which I'm so interested in, contracts transformation leader. That is commercial and strategic. And I came to see your reflecting now on how we came to be sat in this room, and I think it's Ian Maskillen, hopefully I haven't butchered his surname there, who has previously been a guest on the show, who is director or leads the Federation for the Interior Sector. And I saw a post that Ian wrote, which said something along the lines of, wow, I'm so impressed by an event that I just was at, or a piece in an article that I just read, which was, I should have probably prepared better for this, shouldn't I, Kate? which was you talking about what a contract transformation leader is and what you guys are doing at Laing O'Rourke. And I saw that post and I thought, what on earth are they going on about? This sounds totally left field. I want to find out. We then started talking. Explain to the listeners what a contracts transformation leader is doing.
Well, the role is a sort of industry-wide role, and the idea very much is to take a step back, look at how we contract in the industry more widely, look at other industries, how do they contract, are there any lessons to be learned? What do they do well? What do they do less well? That we can take into our industry and make ourselves more efficient and to improve outcomes for all of the stakeholders involved. So you're right, it is a strategic role, and I guess maybe part of my history background in sort of doing research has come in really useful there, because, you know, I've done a lot of reading around how we've got to where we are at the moment, why we're here, what we've tried in the past that hasn't quite worked and why that hasn't quite worked. And part of the, you know, the background research and trying to understand kind of where strategically we want to go with this has been the discovery of a not-for-profit business called World Commerce and Contracting. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they are a global not-for-profit business of 80, 90,000 members. So they're huge, and they work, they are neutral. They don't work for buyer or seller. They work for both across the board, really looking specifically at best contracting practices,
like
across
industry
sector,
agnostic,
cross-sector, cross-globe. So they have an institute of research which includes all of the. It's not an online. It's a repository of the largest amount of academic research on best contracting practice in the world. So for me, that felt like the best place to start looking at kind of what is where we want to get to. And everything that they say, you know, points to the idea that collaborative contracting, doesn't matter what sector you're in,
is the way to go.
Is the way that improves outcomes for supplier and buyer. And obviously in a construction context, that includes, you know, client, contractor, and
subcontractor,
all of the supply chain as well.
And so I am a subcontractor, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't mention it enough.
No, exactly.
And so, well, I say I am a subcontractor. I haven't been a subcontractor for 11 years, but my industry experience was as a subcontract QS, and what I want to get into is a history and a construction podcast here. Right, we'll combine two great subjects, but the history. I'm interested to ask you, like, how the history of, like, where we arrived to with construction contracts today kind of landed, because my experience of construction contracts or subcontracts, and this is not a Laing O'Rourke thing, this is an industry thing, is that as a subby, and I worked for a £25 million subby and a £1 billion subby, so I worked for pretty well-resourced subbies contextually, but we had a lot less resource than a Laing O'Rourke or our clients, right, where you probably had in-house legal counsel, etc. So we would receive a contract which would typically be JCT or NEC based, and then would be amended by the same number of pages as the original. Like, it would just be this huge document. And I remember, and I'm grateful for it at the time, like I went to a lot of like legal seminars and stuff where I was like, oh, so actually we're not using the JCT. I need to read this document to reflect back in, and it's a mess, right? And it's really difficult. And that was kind of like the experience that I had under the umbrella of the marketing was collaboration and partnerships and like, so I was in one ear being told collaboration, and in the other ear
you're given a document that is so dense you can't read it or understand it.
And so just briefly, like, how did we arrive? You say you kind of looked back at the history of it. How did we arrive to that?
I think where we've got to on that particular point is we have our standard forms, which is brilliant. You know, standard forms, I think, transform us into one of the most sophisticated construction markets in the world. And where we've got to is a project has needed changes, and so amendments were made, and then amendments were made on top of that by lawyers who pretty much, you know, wanted to add value, and then they were made again. And actually, if you'd read the original amendments or the original standard form, you'd see that that's covered already. And it's just gradually over the last, 4 decades, grown and grown and grown and grown. And what we need to do is really go through a massive period of rationalizing where we've got to, because I think probably anyone who signed a contract in the construction industry will understand that there's some massive opportunities to save significant time, costs, money, resources that could be better spent actually delivering the services for your project. So, you know, probably the conclusion for all of my research is very much that some of the things that we've tried have failed because they don't suit all parties. It works for one stakeholder in a particular market, and then the market changes. And that's why we've never got any, I think, real traction on improvements in the sort of contract space.
Makes sense.
And that's why I'm leaning on World CC so heavily on this, because it is a neutral body and because the data that they have is used by massive companies like Shell and Rio Tinto to really great effect, insurance companies, etc. So that's, you know, and all of that shows that, you know, if we follow some of the initiatives that they advocate, that serves every single member of a construction project.
So client.
So if we land, yes, we are only looking, from a contract transformation perspective, we are only looking at scenarios that are win for all stakeholders.
Including subbies?
Including subbies. Otherwise, we don't think it's going to land.
Yeah.
And it's not, or at least it may land, but it won't land in a permanent way.
Yeah.
And what we need is permanent change.
And one of the things, absolutely we do. One of the things that you kind of mentioned was, you said your role was kind of industry-wide. What does that actually mean? Because obviously you work for Laing O'Rourke.
Yeah, so I work for Laing O'Rourke. And, you know, the idea very much sort of stems from, we have a huge pipeline. We as an industry have a huge pipeline. The government is asking us to build more than we've done for years and years and years. And therefore, if we're going to do that, and we're going to do that well, and we're going to do that successfully, we have to do things necessarily in a way that is different to how we've done things in the past. And Laing O'Rourke aren't going to suddenly start getting in isolation contracts that are all, you know, fair and balanced and include, you know, risk allocation that works for both parties, you know, that includes risks that contractors can price and program. We're not going to start getting that on our own, and therefore necessarily we have to look at how do we lift the entire industry.
But
part of that is also, you know, learning how to, if we lift the entire industry, we've got to make ourselves more attractive to, you know, I know you talk about resource challenges quite a lot, but, you know, there's that part as well.
Because it's interesting because, so this is episode 259, and at various points through the 5 years I've been doing this show, I've kind of alighted on the obvious through these conversations, which is like, I wear a subcontractor hat. A lot of our listeners are main contractors, a lot of our listeners are clients, right? PQSs. And so you're all kind of looking at it through a similar lens, and a lot of the challenges that I have talked about on this show with interesting people, you kind of fundamentally think, well, but those behaviours are always going to be there between a main and a subcontractor, for instance, because the margins are so poor and the risks are so high, right? And then you think, well, if only we could change that, right? If only we could actually be working on much better margins and much more different contracts, maybe the world would change. And then some of these frictions that I talk about, main contractor and subcontractor, that we all know, would probably still be there, but might be slightly different, because we're kind of driven by KPIs that drive behaviours focused on margin and risk, and everyone has to be stubborn on them. And so I often would end a show and thinking, but how do you do that? Like, how can we just all say no more of this risk, no more of these contracts, we need better margins? And it seems to me like an impossible task. But that's why I was so interested to speak to you, because you're trying to do that in the contract transformation niche on an industry-wide basis. So how do you do that? That's my question, like, because I've been thinking about it for 5 years or whatever now. How do you do it?
How do we change contracts, or how do we change behaviours?
How do we change contracts for where you're looking at it not through a Laing O'Rourke lens, which would make perfect sense. You're looking at it through a Laing O'Rourke lens, but thinking, how can I bring everyone else along with me to the party so that we can say to governments and clients, this isn't how we want to operate anymore as an industry.
So what we've done is, as I mentioned, World CC, we've partnered with them, and one of their big initiatives is, before you even get to risk allocation, their data says that 88% of business users, so client and contractor, subcontractors, find their contracts difficult or impossible to understand.
I reckon more in construction.
And that is, that's cross-sector. So I would say the same. And it's only really going one way. So the idea very much is, gosh, if so many people cannot understand their contracts, why don't we make the contracts easier for them to understand? At the moment, contracts are very legal. They're written in a very sort of legal way. And quite often there's very little thought being given to the end user, who is actually obviously a non-trained lawyer. Let's call them a normal person. On site. Exactly. Imagine if we could change our contracts to something that is straightforward, simple, clear, so that the normal person picking it up and needing to read it and needing to understand it on site can understand it easily. Imagine the improvements that we could make to performance on site. So the idea very much,
No, go for it.
I'm on a roll now. It is very much that we take this contract and we shrink it so far as we can. The risk profile is kept the same pretty much. Because we can't change that risk profile until we get client buy-in, and we regularly get risk profile changes from our main contracts. But we've used World CC, who are experts in contract design, to really change. And I know I've shown you, and we'll put some examples in the show notes.
You're becoming a natural at this podcasting thing, Kate.
so that you guys can see, pretty much what we're looking at. So we've started a pilot contract, and it's gone from being, what you would think of as is dense reams of dark text in, tiny margins.
The JCT, let's imagine.
It's a standalone contract to something that has, it has color, it has massive amounts of white space, it's got headings, everything is well set out, lists, there's a lot of lists on there. One of the huge things that I learnt about, which I'd never even considered, and which, seems completely obvious in retrospect, is the importance of, if you want the person reading your contracts to understand it properly, have lots of white text around the outside, put things in lists, put things in tables, put things in diagrams, because particularly in the construction industry, right, most people are more visual. Looking at specs and drawings and probably, Excel spreadsheets. But we've done that. We've changed our reams of text to much more sort of visually engaging ways of looking at something.
Do you know what one of the first things that I would do whenever I got put on a new project with a new contract, and say I was managing 10 with my team, the first thing I would do is okay, so let's make a payment schedule for the payment terms, because it says the application date is in clause 4.6.1, and then pay less notice is there. It's all such a mess, and you would visualize it and say, okay, so that's how it works. And what a waste of time that is for a project. Do you see what I mean?
Every time we look at a contract, pretty much one of the first things that we would do is draw a timeline of payments. So we have one of those in there already, so that a subcontractor can just have a look very easily. I mean, you can see it says payments very, loud and clear.
I assume it's 14-day payments as well.
and then there's a diagram to show you exactly when you're supposed to be submitting your application for payment, when your final date for payment is. And actually, the feedback on site was very much that particularly the smaller subbies that we work with, they don't have the time or the bandwidth to look at really complex legal clauses, trying to understand when they're allowed to put in their invoice or their application for payment. So hopefully then they lean on our QSs on site, asking them questions. Actually, hopefully that's all
absolutely
cut out now.
Because to talk to my experience as a subby, £1 billion and £25 million, we had QSs, right? We would go through the process. We had the expertise in-house of how do you do the payment? And it's a thing to understand the difference between the due date, pay less, it's not simple. No. It actually kind of defies logic in many ways, that the due date is not the date that you get paid, etc., etc. So without going into that, absolutely, the lower you go down the food chain, the harder it is for a smaller subby to comprehend or understand that. And if you actually zoom out from that, and then, so are they cash flowing the projects right for you as the main contractor, or have they completely misunderstood it? And then you're kind of left with that new risk that's been inserted just because you didn't necessarily understand it. So many different things to comprehend. Just on, you talked about your kind of piloting a simplified contract. Is the contract a reformatting alone, or is it also like a redistribution of risk, and actually you're slimming down the length of the contract?
Well, it's 40% shorter than it was. So that's a big win for both LOR and supply chain.
Yeah.
The risk profile is broadly very similar to what it was previously. We've given what we can. And like I say, the idea very much is once main contract profiles, consistently change, then we're able to
bring that down
to our supply chain. Correct. But yes, I mean, the idea is very much with contract simplification that the commercial deal is not simplified, but we are just turning it into a contract that our supply chain can read, absorb and understand, because if they can't do that, then how do they deliver their projects more successfully?
That makes total sense. And so if I just understand like the contractual arrangement here, so what you're piloting today is this new short form subcontract or short form contracts.
Yeah, we use it for subcontractors and consultants. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a new short form subcontract for consultants and subbies. The main contract with your client on this pilot project, has that also been changed? No. Okay.
So that stays the same. The argument very much for us is, the idea of contract simplification has been around for decades. And, one of the great things about my role is that people send me dissertations and studies and research. So someone sent me their dissertation from the 90s the other day, and contract simplification was the topic. So it's been around for decades, but it hasn't been adopted within the industry. At least not to my knowledge or experience. So, we're really kind of pretty much putting our money where our mouth is. And the idea very much is to roll this out to all of our projects, continue to roll out those principles on the rest of our supply chain contracts, and we will be gathering data via questionnaires from all of our supply chains signing up to these contracts to understand what their experience is of it. Does it improve time to signature? Does it improve trust in Laing O'Rourke as a business? How does that, does it reduce the amount of disputes? Is it making you overall more efficient? What's the impact, long term on trust and collaboration? So all of that data is something that we'll be collecting across, all of our projects over the next, 6 months at least, and we'll be publishing that to the industry so that, people can understand what's going on, what the answers are, what we perhaps could have done better, what they can learn from if they're going to do their own contract simplification ideas. And once we get that data and we can prove that we've made efficiencies, both for us as Laing O'Rourke, for our supply chain, and, in terms of actually the outcomes for the project as a whole, we take that to our clients and say, look, these are the efficiencies that we've made. and imagine the efficiencies that we could make if you could do the same thing from upstream, because obviously the key contract out of all of these projects is the main contract.
Which talks directly to my point of there's this friction between main and sub, but it's driven by top down, isn't it? Margin, contract, risk. And so in this case, it makes perfect sense. You take a short form contract, you test it, you tweak it, you learn from it, and then you kind of use that as the baseline to build up. Has there been conversations with clients where are you actively talking about it with your clients and saying, this is a journey that we're going on, we'd like you to come along with us in 6 months' time, we're going to have all of this data that we're going to show you? Like, how do you engage? Because they're like you say, it's the most important contract, is that one above us all, right?
It is the most important contract, and I feel like I'm on a number of roadshows at the moment talking about contracts.
And you're on another one right now.
Talking about contract simplification. I'm a sort of real evangelist about this these days. So the idea is, yes, we need the data, and then we can take it to to our clients with concrete data, saying, look, this is what we've achieved. And the opportunities to make efficiencies, even bigger efficiencies across all our projects is the opportunity is there.
Yeah, because I guess as it's funny, isn't it? Like, as a greedy subcontractor now, I think it's kind of like you do one thing and then my brain instantly jumps to the next, which is like, can I have this? Can I have this? So you talk about that survey and what the feedback will be from your supply chain. You'd imagine just the fact that you guys are championing this for change will do a lot for trusts, and it will do a lot for kind of future mindset of your supply chain. You'd also imagine that the reformatting, doing my payment schedule, like all of those things will be really well received. And so that like before, I didn't know anyone was doing this. So yeah, I'm so pumped that you guys are doing this. I think it's a great change. But naturally, my point, like where my thinking is, it's like, brilliant, this is a really good step, but how do we redistribute risk in a way that is good for the project? Not in a way that gets away from me, the subby, but it's like the client is saying manage all of this risk, and at the moment like the way that risk gets managed is really, it feels like a lot goes down the supply chain. So naturally, I guess where I like to in my thinking is like, can we talk about the risk? Can we talk about the formatting is good, but can we get to the risk? But I guess it's just part of the process that you're having to work through. It's the next step.
I think we've been talking about risk allocation for so long, and I think we're making improvements. Okay. And we are, as an industry, like I said, I know a lot of people kind of are very critical of the industry, but then if you compare us to other countries, we're so much more sophisticated. Okay. And we have made loads and loads of improvements over the last 20 years. And sometimes we see risk allocation where it really works. And it is fair and balanced. And where there's a risk that we don't understand, either of us as parties, that it's put out in the open and we can deal with it properly when the time comes. I think at least the strategy for contract transformation is given we've been calling for risk allocation for so long and we haven't got it, we need to really kind of instill and prove and instill trust in what it is that we're saying. So contract simplification is a no-brainer for all stakeholders, right? Everyone wins because actually the contractor understand their own contracts better as well. If we can land that, then the next conversation is imagine how many more efficiencies and gains that we can make on our projects if you then dealt with the risk allocation. Because we all know the arguments of risk allocation and the dangers of inappropriate risk allocation on a low margin subby or contractor, and the resulting kind of behaviours that you might get on site where you're concentrating on kind of mitigation strategies and kind of defending a position that hasn't yet materialised. We all know that, but that hasn't landed yet. So so it's simplification first, then risk allocation.
That's what I did my dissertation on, because I'm a sad man. I did it on poor subcontract risk allocation, and it's almost the way I framed it many years ago was like, main contractors are kind of paying for this risk that isn't ever going to happen, or they're not for the things like, and it just felt to me like things are all could just be so much better. And it's funny because, you know, I sell software to people. You're selling a new way to do contracts, right? And I often get frustrated when you're selling someone from a paper process or an analog process to this digital process, and you're kind of taking them from a 3 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10, and then they're like, but I want the 9 and 10 out of 10. I'm like, well, that's coming, but like, which is exactly what I've just said to you. It's like, you're taking me from this horrible process, which we all recognise is not great, which let's call it the 3 out of 10, to this new formatted contract, which I now understand and I can share, and great, which is 7 out of 10. And I'm instantly saying to you,
what's next?
What's next? But you talked about being on your road shows, right? Is part of the work that you're doing actually narrating the story and the journey that you want to take Laing O'Rourke and the industry on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's anyone else in the industry with a role kind of like mine, probably, that has done probably the research and the work on really getting that academic data that shows that, God, if 90% of our people don't understand their contracts, you know, that's what we kind of felt, but now we know it. And we know, so for example, you know, there was this Oxford University study done pre-COVID that said that even with our standard forms, we spend double the median of all other industries on legal services in the UK. So there's so much opportunity.
With no margin at all.
What an opportunity to improve, right? And, you know, in comparison to the States, which for me is probably the most litigious jurisdiction in the world, we spend nearly 3 times the amount that they do, the UK, on legal services.
Really?
So all of those improvements and efficiencies, you know, will go straight to the bottom lines.
If you could paint an ambition for, so you've got the 6-month pilot, then in a couple of years, in 5 years, like, are you seeing like a roadmap to where you want things to be?
I want all our contracts simple and easy to understand, because I think it's super important that subs and contractors can understand what it is that they are really needing to deliver. There's a real kind of buzz phrase in the kind of geeky contracting world of outcome-based contracting, which is really focusing on what is it as clients, contractors, that you need from us in order to deliver our projects successfully. What is it that means that you will, Mr. Client, have had a successful outcome? And there's a real focus, feels like there's a real focus on that in the public sector, very much to their credit. And I think that is, you know, that's where we want to go. Just get real clarity over
the outcome that you want. Because I think probably if you asked a client, would you rather have a project built of epic quality, on time and on budget, or would you rather have a contract that is perfect, that nails all risk onto you? They'd obviously go for the former. So how do we get there? It's really interesting because, you know, when this is a parallel, but when you're a lot of the leadership and management reading that I've done in the past is like, you don't want, with your team, you want to like explain to them the outcome that you are after, but not micromanage the process. So, you know, there's a task to be done. You say, what I want is the client to feel like this, or I need X. You know, you're explaining the outcome, but you're not micromanaging, and this is how I would do it, and do this, that, and the other. And then they kind of go away and do it, right? It's a much better way for everyone to learn and so on. And it's exactly the same principle as what you've just explained. It's saying, do you want the project built in 40 weeks? If that's the outcome you crave, let us do it, as opposed to like micromanaging every component of risk along. Like it's a similar kind of thesis and parallel, right? That actually, what do you want, client, and then we go away and deliver it, because the current contracts are kind of prohibitive to that. What would JCT or NEC, people in those organisations, what do you think? How do you think they would feel like listening to this? Because in many ways, you would think that we're a relatively mature construction sector, as you kind of say. We've got these standard form contracts, but these standard form contracts are getting heavily amended, but even are difficult to understand. Like, still would be in that 10% of people don't understand the contract that they're working to. Is there like an ambition to kind of help the standard forms of contract tweak and change as well?
I think probably, certainly at our level, if we got an unamended JCT, we would be over the moon.
Everyone should be, right?
That isn't an ambition of ours. And the same with the NEC, actually. They already have tables. I think if you got an unamended NEC, you'd also be thrilled.
I agree.
The challenge that we have is with these enormous schedules of amendments that kind of overlay part of an issue here, and 100 pages later another part is covered, that just, lack clarity and kind of consistency. So it's really the focus on the amendments that we're looking at right now. Shift.
But
if JCT and NEC want to, simplify their contracts even further, I just
advocate for it.
Of course, why not?
Yeah, because I would almost, in some ways, challenge that, because I agree. Like if Laing O'Rourke gave me as a subby, here's your unamended JCT DMB, I would be delighted. It's like, great, let's sign it. Let's move on. I guess my query on it is, I was at a mature subcontractor, we understood it. You were a tier 1 main contractor, of course you guys understand JCT unamended. But to the point about 88% of contracts not being understood by the people who were on them, I still believe that at least that number, maybe 90+% of people still wouldn't be able to understand the JCT. Because you can, because you're a lawyer, we could because we're a mature subcontractor. But is there not a world where, an easier, more digestible standard form as well would be beneficial to... Yeah. I'm talking myself into all of this. It all makes sense.
I mean, I agree. I've sort of got a vision of a JCT with lots of different colours and flow charts. That would be lovely.
I completely agree. Just kind of wrapping up the conversation in some ways. You're on this journey for the betterment of Laing O'Rourke and the betterment of the industry, which is so brilliant, which is why I wanted to speak to you. And this has been a lovely conversation. Just if there are other contractors listening to this, are you wanting them along on the journey with you?
Yes, we want you.
This is the road chat.
We want you with us. Yeah. I mean, how much better would it be if we had lots of different contractors using the same data as us and questionnaires on their supply chain to understand the impact of a new simplified contract on how they go to work and how successfully they deliver their projects? So yes, I went to a meeting the other day, and pretty much the top 10 heads of legal of the biggest contractors in the UK were there, and I showed them what it is that we're doing. We had a follow-up conversation with one of them, so that's another multi-billion turnover contractor who's, looks like they're going to go the same journey, and I'll be sharing exactly what we've done, what we think we could have done better with them, because 2 sets of data showing the same trend is so much more powerful. So, when I spoke to, before we did our pilot, I spoke to the lady at Shell who'd done the contract simplification for Shell. And she was really kind and generous with her time and explained kind of what she did and how she went about it. So yeah, I'm really
That's
happy.
what you want to do.
I'm happy to pay that forward. If you want to, if anyone is listening and they want to go on the same journey, please do reach out and have a look at the slides in the notes. We did a presentation last summer to TEXA, the Technology and Construction Solicitors Association, about contract simplification, and it's got the slides are really powerful in there. They're World CC slides, but it really shows the kind of economic rationale behind doing a process such as the one that Rio Tinto and Shell have been through. I mean, just going back to Shell, because it was really eye-opening. They've saved themselves by simplifying one purchase order. And okay, they're a massive blue chip business, but they've saved themselves 60,000 hours of negotiation time annually just on one contract.
Oh my God.
And that's not even supply chain. They're not even counting the amount of time that the supply chains change. So,
and then all of the time that you lose on your projects because you're doing that negotiation.
Because you're not sure what your clauses say, or where you are on IP or whatever clause it might be. Imagine all that time that could go back into delivering the project or thinking about how to deliver your project in a better way. It is a win-win. I keep on saying there's a no-lose scenario for client, contractor, and subs on this.
And if you think about a world where, I was saying, when can you go back and sort the main contract out with your clients and push back so that then we all have this better project contract that we can all work to? In a world where, Laing O'Rourke, together with the other top 10 contractors in the industry, are going back to the public sector or to the industry's clients and saying, look at all of this data. And by the way, this is how we want to work kind of moving forward. That does rattle the cage, for want of a better phrase. That does make, the collective will push back. And then we will have, that more utopian view of, a de-risked project or a de-risked contract then finds its way down to the supply chain, right? So it's just... It's the reason why I was so intrigued to speak to you, Kate, and you've absolutely delivered, is that it kind of feels like the thing that I was like, surely we've got to sort this out somehow. But as an industry, for the 15, 20 years that I've been in it, it feels like at no point have we thought, hey, maybe all of us together should say this is nonsensical and we need to change it. But it feels like you're at the start of that journey of saying, come on, we should all do this.
And that's really what part of our, when we launched our pilot to our supply chain, we did it over a couple of roadshows. And the whole purpose of that is, well, firstly, to show them the contract and what it looked like before, what it looks like now, and all the benefits that we think we've now achieved within it. But the kind of the narrative and the rationale behind it, because in order for this to be a success across the industry, we need our supply chain to understand this and to come with us and to say, oh, you know what, on this other project, Laing O'Rourke are doing this pilot contract. Have you thought about this? Because this is how we think we're delivering in a better way on this project. Come with me, Paul. Come with me on this journey.
Well, this is what I'm you've got my. I told you I was a sad man, but you've got me thinking now. There should be a show in like 6 months, in 12 months, in 18 months, just to see where you are on the journey and like how things are evolving, what you've learned. Because to my mind, if we're in a position where, because you can imagine what the subbies are going to say, right? You're going to get positive feedback, and they're going to be saying what I've just said. Great, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Right? But so it's not going to be a click your fingers, but it was never going to be a click your fingers. So it's a journey, and it's honestly so refreshing to hear just the fact that you're doing it, but B, that you want to do it in collaboration with your contemporaries almost, because that to me feels like the quickest path to victory.
Yeah, that is the wider piece. That is how we land it. And that is how, gradually we also, improve the reputation of the industry and its attractiveness to future resource and, young blood coming through.
There, haven't we?
Contracts, some people don't appreciate, but they feed into all the challenges that we have. So yes, that's the contract transformation piece.
I knew I would enjoy this episode. So all I will say is we'll put Kate's details in the show notes. We'll put the PDF that you talked about in the show notes. And as soon as we stop recording, I'm going to start planning the next episode in 6 months, 12 months, and we're going to watch this journey. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Kate. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much.